Hi, Chris. Welcome to Project NextPlay.
Hey, good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. So, you've had a really, really interesting career that I think lines up perfectly with the theme of this podcast. And you've been a professional baseball player, you've been a sports broadcaster, you're involved with the MLB Players Association. And I guess to start things off, I like to take it back to the beginning. I believe you're from the Bay Area. What was sports like where you grew up? What sports did you play?
Yeah, so I'm from the California East Bay area. I don't want to offend the people down in Tampa. They feel like they've got a Bay Area as well. I think we're the original, Bay Area people out in San Francisco, Oakland. But I'll pick that fight another day with the Floridians. But yeah, sports for me was pretty. I grew up in a great time, man. I think about kids today and parents and just the rat race of just trying to keep your kids in sports and up to speed and practices and travel tournaments and all those things. Man, I played during a time where it was just simple. I remember opening day for Little League, all the cars parked at the high school with, decorated streamers, big parade down the main road to the Little League ballpark. And man, it's just play baseball maybe once or twice a week, have practice maybe once a week or maybe twice. And I don't even think it was twice, but yeah, it just was such a simpler life. It was just more pure. It was more fun. The connections, you didn't have all these carrots that, understandably so, families are chasing. They're chasing the payday, they're chasing the scholarship, they're chasing the NIL money, the professional contracts. And back then, the markets weren't that I guess you'd say like lucrative in terms of, families having their eyes on it. It was just more like, let's live, let's enjoy the moment, let's win, the tournament of champions or all stars and stuff. And it was great. Even growing up for me, Cole, I think I went to a batting cage maybe once or twice my whole time as a kid. They just weren't around that much. I mean, I didn't have one in my town. It's just so different, and there's positives obviously for kids playing today. And then there's maybe some negatives in terms of having to be so focused on one sport playing all year round. I played everything. I played soccer, I played football, I played basketball, I played baseball, you name it, I was doing it. And I think that really helped to develop my athletic ability across the board. And when I was getting scouted for baseball out of high school or yeah, high school, college, definitely high school, because that's where I played other sports. But I remember scouts saying, hey, I used to come and watch you play basketball. Even though I was recruiting you for baseball, I wanted to see your athletic ability and see, everything that you brought in terms of a different sport. And so, yeah, now it's just hard for kids to do that because they'll be behind in the main sport that they want to play. So I'm very thankful that I grew up when I did and really got to enjoy sport on a pure level and didn't have a lot of the pressures as well that these kids have today, with, Instagram and all the different TikTok social medias of, everybody's posting their best life and their best games and hits and everything. And it can create a lot of anxiety for individuals thinking that, their best isn't good enough or that their best is just average, somebody else's average.
Yeah, there's a feeling of falling behind, I think, right? You see what everybody else is doing. If you don't specialize early, you're going
Yeah.
to miss out, all that sort of stuff. So, was baseball always the sport for you?
Baseball was the first love, but then things kind of shifted. Baseball and soccer were strong. I did play Pop Warner football, but it wasn't until I got to high school that I really, pivoted to where football was on the same footing as baseball, and then even exceeded it. By the time I got to my senior year, I just wanted to go to college football and go to college on a football scholarship and play on Saturdays, on television. And so, yeah, things really shifted for me my last 2 years of high school. Part of that too was, coach pulling me aside in the locker room, when I was a freshman, and he's like, "Why aren't you playing football?" He's like, I like baseball, I like basketball. And, he's like, hey, it's hard to get a scholarship in baseball. You need to play football because you need a college scholarship. Because he knew my family, couldn't really afford that. So I took his advice. I played football and things worked out really well. Got a full ride football scholarship to the University of Nevada at Reno, with the option to play baseball as well, because I was drafted by the Houston Astros out of high school. They extended that courtesy to me to allow me to play baseball at the school after I kind of established myself in football.
You must have done pretty well with baseball then in college because I saw you were drafted, I think, in the 30th round out of high school to the Houston Astros. And then a few years later, you were drafted in the second round, I think, by the San Francisco Giants, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I had never in high school I never played summer ball or any of that stuff. As soon as the high school season was over, I went to football camp. I started practicing football. So I didn't get the reps and develop my ability, if you will, in high school, I think to warrant being a higher draft pick. I just really couldn't see myself at the time going and playing baseball all summer, playing 100 games or something like that. I was just like, yeah, I can't imagine that. And then it was like, hey, you go to Florida, it's hot and humid in Florida. I was like, I just couldn't see myself doing it. So I really wasn't that interested. I was flattered and honored that I was drafted, but yeah, I didn't know exactly what that meant. And going to college, I didn't even know if I was good enough to play in college. It was kind of more like a curiosity thing than anything else. Was just like, hey, let me go out and see if I'm even good enough to play here. And things ended up, going well. I was still very raw, even with getting drafted in the second round in 1993. I still was raw. I think what Doug McMillan, the late Doug McMillan, a great San Francisco Giants scout, he saw the potential in me and turned in high reports to the Giants' upper levels of management, and they took a shot.
Did you play all 4 years of college?
No, I only played 2 years of baseball in college. So actually, after high school, I didn't play baseball for like 2 years. I just played football, 2 seasons of football, and then after my second season of football, I went out in the spring to play baseball.
Was there like a moment where you had to kind of shift gears, go from wanting to be a football player to maybe this baseball thing is going to work out?
Yeah, I would say what happened was after my first year playing, it was like, okay, I'm good enough to play in college. Oh, this is cool. Had fun. Definitely felt the difference in my body physically. You could play 2 or 3 games in a row in baseball. Like, hey, what are we doing tonight? Let's go somewhere. Football game on a Saturday afternoon, evening, you're just numb, sitting on the couch, just numb from all the hits that you realize you took and the ones you don't even realize you took. And so I was like, "Hey, this is a lot nicer." And then then I go back my second year, and it was kind of like rediscovering my first love. Little league was my first love, and I found myself just enjoying being at the ballpark for practices, for games. Loved how physically it was a lot easier than, the torture you put your body through in football. And, yeah, I just started really to kind of fall in love with it, and I believe that, God was just ordering my steps and really guiding my life in a way where everything was coming together for, like, his higher will for me, what I was gonna do with my life and my career.
Positions did you play in football and baseball?
I was a wide receiver in, football, a kickoff returner, did a little punting as well, but primarily wide receiver. I was like the 3rd string quarterback also, so if I wasn't, if there was a pinch or there was something like that, I'd have to go in. I never got under center to take any snaps, but they did create a couple of plays that were handing off to me, and then I was throwing, so that was kinda cool because I played some, quarterback growing up and in high school and always had a really good arm. So I like to, throw the ball. But yeah, so that's what I played in football and baseball. I was a right fielder in college, center fielder, right fielder, but we had a speedy center fielder that didn't have quite the arm that I had. So I was in right in college, and then I got drafted to play center field by the Giants.
And I think you made it to the majors in 1999. Is that right?
Yes, yes, with the
So you
Chicago
had
White Sox.
a few years in the minors then.
Yeah.
Where were you playing in the minors? What was that like, that grind?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun actually. I played in Everett, Washington one summer, about 45 minutes, I think, maybe from Seattle. Beautiful. Great host family, great little town. It was a blast. I had so much fun playing, up there in Everett. Then I played in San Jose for 2 years, Northern California. Played in Shreveport, Louisiana for 2 years, which was, San Jose, great relationships, great people. They had host families again, wonderful people, lifelong friends that I still am in touch with. Shreveport, Louisiana was definitely a culture shock for me. Being a California kid, yeah, Seattle's a little different, but it's, still kind of the West Coast. And San Jose obviously was very similar to where I grew up. But Shreveport was, it was totally different. But the people were wonderful. Small town, very hospitable. And yeah, we enjoyed it there. So I was there for 2 years. And then I was 1 year in Columbus, Ohio. I got traded from the Giants to the Yankees. So I spent a year in Columbus, Ohio in 1998, and then I was traded to the White Sox in the offseason of 98, and then spent the rest of my career in the big leagues.
You had an incredible first year. I think I saw you were batting 300, 17 home runs. What did that feel like?
It was especially the home runs. I never hit that many home runs. I mean, I was like a big, strong, athletic guy, but I didn't have a swing that produced sort of the loft and the backspin to hit home runs. I was more of like a line drive hitter. So that was kind of a shock. I don't think I ever hit double digit home runs in the minor leagues. So to hit 17 as a rookie in the big leagues was it was pretty wild. It was a wild ride. I hit for the cycle my rookie year, which I had never done in the minor leagues. I had a couple 5-hit games. I mean, it was an incredible season. One, to be in the big leagues, but then two, to have so much success early.
Was that one of those things where you come out, you get a little confidence and it just keeps rolling? What do you think the difference was?
I think I had it. My hitting coach Von Joshua was really good. And you get more attention when you're in the big leagues in terms of the coaching and people that are paying attention to the details of your swing. And he was, I thank God for him because he believed in me. He saw a lot in me, and probably more than I saw in myself. And he was committed to helping me realize my potential. And so he was a big part of that rookie year, whether it was mentally or just even mechanically, just helping me to believe, to gain confidence, and to have the right approach. So, yeah, that was a big difference.
When you start playing in the minor leagues and in Major League Baseball, obviously sports is now your profession. Was there any sort of shift between what baseball meant to you or like the place it had into your life at that time?
I would say the shift really, if there was a noticeable shift, it took place more when I crossed over into the big leagues because the show, as they call it, brighter lights, brighter, wider baseballs, more people in the stands, television, all of those things. You also were more directly exposed to the business side of the game and realized that, it's no longer development like in the minor leagues. Hey, we're trying to develop you to help you get better to get to the big leagues. You get to the big leagues, you're expected to get it done. And I saw how much of a business and straightforward it was. That's when, the level of pressure increases. You're facing the best of the best. So, one game ends, you're already turning the page to tomorrow. Who's starting tomorrow? And you're trying to think through, okay, what's their plan of attack? How do I want to react and everything else? So it's definitely mentally, it's exhausting, over the course of 162 season, just, trying to stay focused and be productive. So that's what I would say. Things definitely, there's a shift.
It's so interesting. Like I guess I'm reading DeMar DeRozan, the NBA player's memoir right now, and it's so interesting hearing him talk about the shift going from college to professional sports. And one of the things that he mentions is just the cutthroat nature of professional sports and how that influences the team aspect of a professional sports team, where people might blow up a team season after season if they're losing, but if you start winning, all of a sudden players stay around and you're able to to develop some sort of a um, maybe family aspect of the team that you might be missing otherwise. In baseball, it seems like clubhouses are a really big part of the sport. And I know you played for a few different teams. Were there major differences between the teams that you played for?
Yeah. I mean, characteristically, I would say that, in Chicago with the White Sox, good clubhouse, good setup, access to, training room, weight room, batting cage. It was very, the proximity of all those things was very smooth and easy. Yeah, it was a good clubhouse. And then, playing in Baltimore, the culture, it was a losing culture. And so that was shocking for me because from football in college, we were always successful, won our, conference or championships, things like that. And then playing for the White Sox, we always believed, and we were in a city where it's like, hey, you got to bring it. Like the media will eat you up if you don't bring it. So there was a focus and an expectation, maybe unrealistic at times, but an expectation and sort of a commitment to success. And when I got to Baltimore, it was just sort of flat. Like it was, the media pressure wasn't, like Chicago or New York or anything like that. And then they were on the downside in terms of, winning and having won anything. And there was just a lot of complacency. So it was kind of weird for me, even though they were good people, that nobody was really, I mean, I won't say nobody, but it didn't seem like many people were upset after a loss. And I just never, was that way. And then after Baltimore, I went to Oakland, and that was like playing little league baseball again. I mean, it was just, these guys were just crack up, laugh all the time during the game, all that stuff. It was like being in a little league dugout, but we were really good at the same time. We were, I would say, arguably the best team in the American League that year. We lost in the playoffs to the Red Sox, really kind of just choked a series that we were up 2-0, best of, 3 of 5, and we ended up losing 3 straight. But we were arguably the best team in the American League that year. We just had a bad, few days. And but that was the most fun I ever had
Hmm.
anywhere. Then
You
my
were
final
also
year, Tampa,
you were
yeah.
also you were also home at that point too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was from the, I lived in Arizona at the time. I'd moved to Arizona during my minor league career. So going back to the Bay Area it was good and bad. It was interesting as a visiting player when I'd come into Oakland, I played terrible in that ballpark, and I was exhausted every time I'd leave because just so many family, friends, and everything else. And then when I was a free agent one off season and, the A's called, the Angels called, the Angels actually were offering me more money than the A's, but I just felt a piece in my heart like, "Hey, I think I need to go to Oakland." Didn't make sense, but I ended up having a lot of fun and a great year and was able to get some things I discovered when I was there. I was going through spring training physicals, and one of the team doctors was a thyroid specialist, and he was examining me in a way that most doctors wouldn't. And he found that I had nodules in my thyroid. It turned out I had a low grade of thyroid cancer that had to be removed and everything else. So it was kind of one of those things where I was like, oh, wow, this is part of maybe the biggest part of the reason why I came to Oakland, because most teams would not have a thyroid specialist as one of their staff, team doctors. So yeah, so it ended up being a really fun year. And, we did well as a team, and there was a lot of expectation, but we didn't get over the hump.
And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You had one other team that you played for.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay Rays. We were the Devil Rays back then, and they got a lot better after they just went to the Tampa Bay Rays. A year or two later, they had some really good stretches and good runs, and still a solid organization. But yeah, Tampa was nice. I actually was out of the game for a year. I just took a year off. After that year, I had the surgery, and I was supposed to have another surgery, and I just was kind of unsure if I wanted to continue. So I took a year off in '04, and then I went back and played in '05 for half the season, and then I was done.
Shoot. Was
Yeah.
the Oakland era, was that Moneyball?
Yeah.
Wow. So is that Billy Bean and all of that the movies have been made about and whatnot?
Yeah.
That must have been pretty cool to be a part of.
Ha! Not as a player. It kinda sucked as a player because it was taking away the human element of the game. It was,
Yeah.
somebody would go put an athletics cap on the computer in the locker room and say, "That's our manager." So it was like, it wasn't, I'm sure it was a good movie, which I've never seen, but I lived it and it wasn't so great.
Wasn't fun to be a part of. You
Yeah.
mentioned liking soccer when you were younger. Soccer is sort of going through that analytical
Mm,
evolution right now where
okay.
stats are becoming much more important.
Yeah.
With my background in soccer, I'm a big, big fan. And I think it's totally killing the game. Like it's so much less interesting. We've got, people doing wide receiver routes on corner kicks and long throw-ins and all sorts of stuff, and it's working, but it's just less beautiful than it was 10 years ago, in my opinion. Do you think that that's had, like, a lasting effect on baseball?
Yeah, the game, the love story and the mystery of the game doesn't exist the way that it did in previous eras and generations. I mean, everything now is more individualized, even though it's a team sport. It's like we've isolated all of these things. It's kind of like, health and nutrition where you take, hey, we're going to isolate all these different vitamins and then we're going to try to put them back into a tablet instead of just taking something that's whole, that has everything intact and has all the synergistic effects of how it naturally occurs in nature. I look at kind of baseball that way in some ways, that the way that it's become so much more focused on the individual rather than how does it fit? How does a player fit in a lineup? What's the chemistry? How does it flow? Those things. And then even the game, the way the game's played. I mean, now you rarely see anyone bunt. No one bunts a guy over, sack fly, get him in. I mean, there used to be things where you took pride in as a player. So if you were at the plate, nobody out, runner on second base, your job is to hit a ball to the right side of the field to advance him to third. That's your number one job. If things go great, then you get a base hit that drives him in from second. If things go really good, you hit a home run and he goes out of the ballpark. But first things first was you got to get this guy over. And so just seeing a player really take pride in that job of doing whatever he could, wherever the ball was pitched, I'm going to hit a hard ball to the right side of the infield. And then when he makes that right turn after touching first base and comes back in the dugout, everybody in the dugout is waiting for him at the top step to give him a high five. He didn't get a hit. He didn't drive in a run, but he played team baseball the way that used to help create this beautiful story of the game and how we all consumed it and loved it. That kind of stuff just doesn't exist anymore. And so it's harder to watch. I still enjoy it, and I marvel at some of the skill sets and abilities that guys have today, but I wish that it was still in the context of the team winning and ultimately, winning a championship. Yeah, every guy's like, yeah, we want to win. We want to win a championship. But the approach is different. And before it was about how do we turn a lineup over? How do we get things going? Everybody played their role. Like when I was in Chicago, hey, my job, if I'm hitting in front of Frank Thomas, my job's to get on base. However I can get on base, get the big guy to the plate. Now everybody's a big guy. Everybody's trying to hit homers. Everybody's trying to. Sorry about that. My light goes out.
Oh, good.
So it's like it's just different. So yeah, I think similar to what you're experiencing in soccer exists in baseball.
Is there a team that you support within baseball
I
or any
support
sport, I guess?
all 30. All 30, yeah. I mean, as working for the Players Association, we just have to support everybody. And there's
Everybody.
certain matchups that I might like, better, or there's certain ownership groups or management that you feel, hey, they do a good job of taking care of players. They've got a better culture, so you may root for those teams more than teams that have maybe not so great a owner or not so great management or don't treat the players and families as well.
Well, speaking of the MLB Players Association, I know you've been in broadcasting for a long time now.
Mhm.
And I guess maybe before we jump into that, was what kind of pushed you towards retirement, learning about that thyroid cancer? Was that a big piece of kind of slowing down your professional baseball career? Were there other pieces that
No, yeah, just I think it was just part of it. It really wasn't the driving factor. My driving factor was my kids, my oldest at the time, Sydney, my daughter, she was ready for school. We had been homeschooling her, I think, kind of up until that time, but it was like time for her to go to school. And I never wanted to be a dad that wasn't around. I didn't want to be out, playing baseball and I'm in Chicago and they're in Atlanta and they come out in the summer when school is out, stay for a couple of months and then go home. And I'm spending, almost half of the year away from them for the most part. I had no interest in that. I wanted to be a husband, I wanted to be a dad, and so when it got to the point where my kids were gonna be in school, I wanted to be a proud dad that was waiting at the bus stop when my kid got off the bus because I never had that as a kid. You know, my parents divorced when I was young. My mom worked, long hours and days, and I grew up a lot of the time by myself. And so I wanted to recapture that experience by being able to be there for my kids.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. And I think that that is so cool. And I also have one other question before we jump into what you're doing right now. When you were playing, what was the culture of mental health within baseball? And like what place did talking about mental health have within the clubhouse, for example?
It was this, I won't say. It was so foreign, taboo. It was, "You're crazy." Like, no one I mean, guys, I'm sure were dealing with things, but there wasn't it wasn't, even a conversation that teammates would have with one another. If there was a guy that was talking to someone, you thought he had real problems. So, it's come a long way since then. I think that I would have had a more enjoyable career and even more successful had mental health and mental performance been more of the norm that it is now if it was when I was playing.
Are there like things that, well, I guess maybe we'll get into this. So now you are a broadcaster. I also saw that you are the voice of MLB The Show. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you end up getting into broadcasting? Was there a break between your baseball career and that, or did you kind of jump right in?
Yeah, so my broadcasting career, just for the record, I completed my last contract with ESPN in 2021. So I am not, active broadcasting other than doing some content creation, hosting for the Major League Baseball Players Association. But what happened was when I decided in '05 to kind of walk away from the game, I was approached, because during the course of your career, you do a lot of interviews and things, and people can be very complimentary, like, "Hey, you'll be a great broadcaster when you're done." And so I had some people reach out to me from ESPN and said, "Hey, would you like to just co-host this Baseball Tonight show on the radio on Sunday afternoons?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll do it." So I would go down to a radio station here in Atlanta and get plugged in and co-host the show. And a lot of people listen to the show, a lot of, general managers and different people. And so, I would get some messages from folks like, "Hey, I heard you on the show, man. You sound really good." And then I got a reach out from the Chicago White Sox that same year towards the end of the season or maybe right after the season was over, asking me if I was interested in interviewing for their radio job. And I was like, I don't want to go back into a baseball schedule. I just came out of a baseball schedule. I don't want to be home. But I went through the process and interviewed, and they offered me the job. And we bought a condo in Chicago, so we just took the whole family up there, and it was actually a lot of fun. Just kind of still being part of the game, but not having the stress and pressure of playing. So I could get up in the morning, go work out, come home, do homeschool with the kids. We go walk the city, have lunch, do all these things. Oh, it's 3:30, 3:45. I better get home, change real quick, and head over to the ballpark, to get there by 4:30. So it was a very relaxed, enjoyable life. And that's where it started. So I was there for a couple of years. Then I kind of wanted to get back to Atlanta and just kind of get my kids back around, family and friends. And an opportunity at ESPN, we kind of, kicked the door open a little bit, my agent and I, and ended up spending the next 14 years at ESPN after 2 years in Chicago.
A lot of professional athletes talk about, and just athletes in general, after their kind of competitive career ends, a feeling of like loss of self. There needs to be like a reinvention of what your purpose is and your identity and so on and so forth. And so you stayed within baseball, but you're doing something different. You're not playing anymore. You're a broadcaster. Was that like an extension of your baseball life? Was there some sort of maybe reinvention that happened?
Yeah, so for me, it was a very soft landing, as I would call it, especially now, being the director of player resource programs at the MLBPA, and part of my role is to help facilitate and help guys um, transition from playing to what's next. And whether it's education, whether it's getting into a career or vocation, I see individuals that have a hard time. They have a hard time mentally turning the page and moving forward. You just aren't going to find, even if you didn't play in the major leagues, if you played in the minor leagues, you're still going to be hard pressed to find anything in life that is going to demand so much of you in terms of physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, all of those things. And then if you're wired as an athlete, you know, you sort of embrace that fear of failure. Like that's why you play, because you can fail. And there are hormones I think that, are circulating and get released when we get put into those situations. And it's like a love-hate situation, but we long for that. And so, life after the game typically doesn't provide that. So for me, going into broadcasting actually was a very soft landing because you still had a performance based career, you still had to deal with some level of fear of failure doing live broadcasts, whether on radio or on television, getting your stuff right, getting your words out, like getting better and being more efficient with how I'm describing a play, all of those things. So there was plenty of growth that could happen. There was also challenges. There was also criticism. Being a city like Chicago, they can be merciless, some of these radio talk shows and people. And, you make a mistake or something like that, and they could just be burying you the next day. And so there was that element. So it was very similar to being a player, but just not having as much exertion in terms of physically and mentally. And so I would say that. And then when I went to ESPN, it got heightened up because you're on the worldwide leader of sports, the biggest sports network in the world. You're in front of everybody, man. And so just even dealing with that. So I think for me, it regulated and kept a lot of the elite athlete mindset. It kept it in play, and still had, adrenaline, before a show, and,
Mhm.
the high as well of like, man, if we had a great show, that sense of teamwork, man, we did well. We put out a good one, all of those things that we love about sport. It's not just us
Yeah,
going out and playing. It's part of being part of a team, trying to accomplish something together, doing life with each other, whether it's being on the road or having dinner and getting ready for a game, all of those things. So it's very easy for me compared to other guys. And I was super blessed and fortunate to have had that path, because a lot of good guys don't, and they find themselves in dark places.
definitely. I've been trying to think of like a framework or put together a framework to kind of describe that phase of just like the athlete life, the athlete experience. And I think part of describing it is sort of defining the place of sports within our lives. And I've come up with kind of three buckets. There's like hobbies, there's practices, and there's profession. And, when you're playing baseball in Major League Baseball, that's of course, a profession. But I think sports for most people is really kind of a practice. It's something that we find fulfillment within. There's personal evolution involved in it. It's something that we're constantly trying to get better at. And I think when sports leaves your life, especially team sports, it's really hard to recreate that environment elsewhere. And so that's awesome to hear that you had sort of like a soft landing within broadcasting. I can totally see how that would be a practice that you can get better at, that you're constantly trying to evolve and so on and so forth. um when you finished playing, did people treat you differently when you weren't a player? Like, did you notice a shift in how people saw you?
The only thing that I could say would be, is old teammates. When I go in the clubhouse a year later, after finishing, oh, here's media. Media's here. Media, because, especially back then, media was the enemy. And so you've now gone to work for the enemy in their minds, and kind of jokingly, half serious back then. Now it's just a norm. Everybody goes into it. It's not seen that way. But back then it wasn't as common, and there weren't as many opportunities for players to, go into broadcasting as there are now. So yeah, so that's the only way I would say that people kind of saw me differently, was just, players, where it's like, and then too, because you have to like analyze the game, and you have to be truthful. And there'll be times where, hey, guy didn't like what you said about him. You know, didn't say something like personally attacking, but it's like, hey, this guy's struggling right now. He's 0 for his last 15. He's flying open with his front side, and he's committing to pitches that he hasn't recognized yet. That's the truth. That's the honesty. But the player hears that, or he has a buddy who's half drunk back at home who's watching the game, who calls him and says, "Oh man, Chris Singleton's saying stuff about you. He's talking, schmack about you, man, and this, that, and another." And then half the time the players didn't even hear what you said. They're just going off of what their buddy or family member said. And then they're stepping towards you in a way that's like, yeah, man, that's not cool. So yeah, those are the probably the biggest hurdles for me. And I think also challenging to establish my confidence to fully step into the role of a broadcaster, because there's still that part player of you, and you can't, like, you got to, at some point, you got to embrace, I can't go back to being a player. That's over. So I'm going to have to sort of burn that ship and fully stepping into being a broadcaster. And that might mean some players don't like me, or they don't like what I have to say because I'm part of the media now. Or every now and then you may say something that isn't praising them. I was never a person that said bad things or negative things, but sometimes the egos in players, they want you to say good things about them all the time. And that's just not possible.
Yeah. It's almost like you can't fully step into your role as a broadcaster if you haven't stepped out of that role as a professional player.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess with your role in the Players Association now, was that something that you had started while you were still broadcasting? Were you involved, or did you
No.
finish up broadcasting and move into that role?
Yeah, I was out of broadcasting for at least a year before Tony Clark reached out to me to be on an advisory council. So I started that in summer of 2022, an advisory council of former players that met weekly with Tony. And then a year and a half later, they offered me a full-time position, a position I actually created because they wanted to develop a mental health program. They wanted to have somebody dedicated to career transition and development. And so they created that role, and they hired me to do that job.
Was there anything that prompted the MLB to want to do that?
Well, the Players Association, it's important, the distinction, because everyone thinks it's the same, MLB, MLBPA. But the Players Association, under, Tony Clark's vision and leadership, he wants to provide more for the players. We are the strongest sports labor union in the world. And a lot of that's because of our collective bargaining agreements and no salary caps and things like that, and pension and everything. But he also wasn't content with those sort of measurables, wanted to do more for the players and their families. And I tip my cap to him because previous executive directors weren't as progressive. I mean, he's done a lot. Under his leadership, we have developed Business Arm Players Inc., which is a subsidiary of the Players Association, which is generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and just, creates more for the players to have in terms of their benefits and or resources. If there's a work stoppage or things like that, there's just resources to help and support players. So he's done a tremendous job, but it's his vision that created the opportunity for me, and then I'm running with it.
And your title I saw was Director of Player Resource Programs. And so people that hear that might not know exactly what that means. So like, how do you describe your work to others?
Yeah, so our resource programs are our mental health program. It's developing slowly, but financial literacy and education, and then career development and transition. And so those are the resource programs primarily that we are promoting to the players to lean into and take advantage of. They're there for you. And so for me, I'm a special assistant director of player resource programs. So my primary focus, I think the thing that takes the most of my time and calendar as it's related to work, is our mental health program. I'm sort of the coordinator of all of that. So I work between OnRise, our partner, and the PA, and then help to inform our special assistants who are out, on the going to the ballparks, visiting clubhouses, communicating with players about A to Z, everything about their rights and provisions and benefits and all of those things. So just making sure that everyone's